Hello, my name is Mason. I'm 24 and I live in a quiet little neighborhood just outside Bend, Oregon. The kind of place where the streets are lined with maple trees that turn fiery red every fall and the air smells like pine and fresh cut grass in the summer. I've been here my whole life in the same small house my grandpa left me when he passed 5 years ago. It's nothing fancy, just a one-story with creaky hardwood floors, a screen door that squeaks no matter how much oil I put on it, and a front porch that faces a white wooden fence separating my yard from the house across the street. That fence is where I first really noticed her. I work at Gear and Grind, a bike repair shop tucked between a laundromat and a thrift store on the edge of town. It's the kind of place that's been around forever with faded posters of old Tour de France races peeling off the walls and a coffee machine that only works if you sweet talk it. Most of my days are spent fixing flat tires for kids who crashed into curbs or adjusting brakes for retirees who ride the trails out by the Deschutes River. The pay's decent enough to cover the mortgage and keep the lights on, and I like the work. There's something satisfying about taking a busted bike and making it roll smooth again. Keeps my hands busy and my mind from wandering too far. My life's simple. I wake up at 7, brew coffee in a pot that's older than I am, and ride my own bike to the shop 10 minutes if I take the back roads. After work, I come home, tinker with whatever project I've got going in the garage, maybe grill a burger or heat up leftovers. I'm not big on going out. My friends from high school are scattered, some moved to Portland, some started families, and I'm fine with the quiet. Most nights I sit on the porch with a beer listening to the crickets and watching the sky turn purple over the Cascades. It's not exciting, but it's mine. Across the street lives Julia. I don't know her exact age, somewhere in her early 40s, I'd guess, but she's the kind of beautiful that doesn't try. Her hair's a soft brown, usually pulled back in a loose bun with a few strands that escape and catch the light when she's out watering her roses. She's got these sharp green-gray eyes that seem to see everything, but there's a sadness in them, like she's carrying something heavy she doesn't talk about. She works from home, I think, always on her laptop at the kitchen table or out on her porch with a mug and a notebook. We've lived across from each other for years, but we've barely spoken. A wave here, a hey there when we're both grabbing the mail, that's about it. She moved in right after her divorce, or at least that's what Mrs. Larson next door told me once, in that gossipy way old ladies do. Said Julia's ex was some hotshot lawyer from Chicago who left her for someone younger. I didn't pry. People's business isn't mine unless they make it mine. Julia keeps to herself, same as me. She's polite but distant always in oversized sweaters or flowy skirts like she's comfortable in her own skin but doesn't need anyone else to notice. I noticed anyway. It was a Thursday afternoon, one of those perfect June days where the sun's warm but not brutal, and the air feels like it's holding its breath before summer really kicks in. I'd just gotten home from the shop, my hands still smelling like chain lube, and I was out front messing with my bike's derailleur. It had been acting up all week, and I was determined to fix it before the weekend. I was crouched in the driveway, toolbox open, when I saw her. Julia was standing on her porch holding a piece of paper. Not just holding it, clenching it like she wanted to crumple it into dust. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight, and her eyes were fixed on the ground. I'd never seen her look like that. She's always so composed, even when she's hauling groceries or wrestling with that ancient lawnmower of hers. But right then, she looked lost, like the paper in her hand was a bomb about to go off. I don't know why I did it. I'm not the guy who sticks his nose in other people's business, but something about the way she stood there, shoulders hunched, made me set down my wrench and walk over. The fence between us was low, just waist high, so I leaned on it and called out, "Hey, Julia. You okay?" She startled like she hadn't heard me coming. Her eyes flicked up, and for a second I thought she might brush me off. But then she sighed a heavy, defeated sound and held up the paper. "Neighborhood block party," she said, her voice flat. "This Saturday, everyone's going." I glanced at the flyer. Bright colors, clip art barbecue grills, the usual. "Sounds like fun," I said, trying to keep it light. "You going?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound, more like a scoff. I wasn't planning on it. She folded the flyer in half, then in half again, her fingers moving too fast. "Mark's gonna be there. With her. Mark. Her ex." I'd never met the guy, but I knew the name from Mrs. Larson's gossip. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, waiting for her to go on. She did. He's bringing his new girlfriend. She's 25, I think. Some yoga instructor he met at the gym. Julia's voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. They were glassy, like she was holding back a storm. I don't want to walk in there alone, Mason. I can't. They'll all be watching, waiting for me to fall apart. I should have said something comforting like, you don't have to go or screw them. But what came out of my mouth was something else entirely. What if I go with you, I said. As your boyfriend. Fake, I mean. Just for the night. She stared at me, and then she laughed. A real laugh, loud and startled, like I'd told the world's dumbest joke. You're kidding? She said, wiping her eyes, but I could tell she wasn't crying anymore. I'm not, I said. I don't know why I doubled down. Maybe it was the way she looked so small, clutching that stupid flyer. Maybe it was the idea of her facing that jerk alone. Or maybe I just wanted to see her smile like that again. Come on, we'll show up. Hold hands, make them choke on their potato salad. One night. No big deal. She kept staring, her mouth half open like she was trying to figure out if I'd lost my mind. You'd do that, she asked finally. Why? I shrugged, suddenly feeling like an idiot. Because you shouldn't have to deal with that crap alone. And because I've got nothing better to do on a Saturday. She didn't say yes right away. She looked at the flyer, then at me, then back at the flyer. Finally, she nodded slow like she was testing the idea. Okay, she said. But we're going to need to practice. I don't want to look like I hired a stranger off the street. I grinned. Deal. When do we start? She smiled, then a small one, but real. Tomorrow night. My porch. Bring coffee. I walked back to my house feeling like I'd just signed up for something I didn't understand. My bike was still in the driveway, half fixed, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to something that wasn't just another day at the shop. The next evening, I showed up at Julia's porch at 7 sharp, 2 paper cups from the diner in my hands. Black coffee for me, 2 sugars. For her, I'd guessed oat milk latte, no foam, because I'd seen her carry one home from town once. She opened the door before I could knock, barefoot in jeans and an old University of Chicago sweatshirt, hair still damp from a shower. The porch light caught the loose strands around her face, and for a second I forgot what I was supposed to say. You remembered, she said, taking the latte. Her fingers brushed mine warm from the cup. Most people don't. We sat on the top step, knees almost touching. The air smelled like cut grass and the lavender she kept in pots along the railing. Crickets were already tuning up in the yard. She sipped her coffee and eyed me over the rim. So fake, boyfriend? Where do we start? I laughed, more nervous than I expected. I was hoping you had a script. No script, she said. Just don't make it weird. We started small. I held out my hand. She stared at it like it might bite her, then slipped her fingers through mine. Her palm was soft, but her grip was firm, like she'd decided to commit. Okay, she said. Boyfriend level 1 hand-holding. How's it feel? Like I'm 12 and at a school dance, I said. She snorted and the tension cracked. We practiced pet names. I tried babe and immediately cringed. She countered with sweetie in a syrupy voice that made us both laugh until she had to wipe her eyes. We're terrible at this, she said. Give it time, I told her. We've got 4 days. But the next night, something shifted. I brought coffee again this time, a French press I dug out of my grandpa's cupboard, and we moved to the wicker chairs on her porch. The rehearsal stuff lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then she asked about the shop, and I found myself telling her about the kid who'd brought in a bike with streamers and a flat tire, how his mom had teared up when I fixed it for free because they couldn't afford the repair. Julia listened like she was taking mental notes. Chin in her hand, eyes steady on mine. Your turn, I said. She hesitated, then told me about Chicago. Not the glossy version, how she'd chase leads until 3 in the morning, live on coffee and adrenaline file stories from the back of cabs. How she'd once spent a week undercover at a dogfighting ring, came home shaking, and still wrote the piece that got her a byline in the Tribune. I thought that was living, she said quietly. Turns out it was just running. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was full. Night 3, she invited me inside. Her living room smelled like old books and cedar. A stack of manuscripts sat on the coffee table, red pen marks bleeding through the pages. She poured us wine, cheap stuff, but cold, and we sat on the couch, legs stretched out, feet almost touching. We ran through the plan for the party arrive at 7:30, stay an hour, leave before the karaoke started. But we kept getting sidetracked. She asked about my dream Gear and Grind 2.0, a combo shop and cafe with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu. I sketched it on a napkin espresso machine here, bike racks, their big windows for sunlight. She added a corner for local art, a shelf for used books. You'd need a name, she said. Something that feels like home. Already got one, I said. Haven Cycles. She smiled soft. I like it. I don't know when the pretending stopped mattering. Maybe it was the night she fell asleep on the couch mid-sentence, head tilted against the cushioned wine glass tipped precariously in her lap. I took the glass, set it on the table, and pulled the throw blanket over her shoulders. She stirred, murmured something I couldn't catch, and settled again. I sat on the floor beside the couch, back against it, and listened to her breathe. The room was dark except for the streetlight filtering through the blind, striping her face in gold. I stayed until the clock hit 2, then slipped out quietly, locking her door with the spare key she'd left under the mat. The next morning, I found a note tucked under my wiper. Thanks for the blanket. And for not being weird about it. Jay, I kept it in my wallet. By Friday, we weren't rehearsing anymore. We were just hanging out. She'd text me random thoughts. Do you think potato salad is a cry for help? And I'd send back photos of the shop's latest disaster, a bike frame painted neon pink by a 6-year-old with a mission. We'd end up on one porch or the other, coffee or beer, talking until the stars came out. She told me about the article she couldn't finish, the one about finding yourself after someone else tried to erase you. I told her about the letter I never sent my dad before he died, the one still in my desk drawer. We didn't fix each other's stories. We just listened. Saturday loomed closer, but it didn't feel like a performance anymore. It felt like the next natural step. The night before the party, she texted, "Come over. I made pasta. And I'm out of fake excuses." I showed up with a 6-pack and a grin I couldn't wipe off. She met me at the door and an apron sauce splattered on her cheek. "You're late," she said, but she was smiling. We ate at her kitchen table, candles flickering, the radio playing something old and slow. She'd made spaghetti with the good Parmesan, the kind that comes in a wedge, not a green can. We talked about everything and nothing, her fear of karaoke, my inability to dance the way the neighborhood kids called me, Bike Guy, like it was my superhero name. When the plates were empty, I started washing dishes. She dried. Our elbows bumped. Neither of us moved away. She set the last plate in the rack and turned to me, arms crossed, hip against the counter. "Tomorrow," she said. "We pull this off, and then," what I dried my hands on the towel, heart thudding too loud. "Then we figure out what comes next." No script. She looked at me for a long moment, eyes searching. Then she nodded once. Okay. I left her porch that night with the taste of garlic and possibility on my tongue. The summer air was thick, the kind that sticks to your skin. I didn't look back, but I felt her watching from the doorway until I disappeared behind my own fence. The night before the party, Julia's kitchen felt smaller than usual, the air thick with garlic and the low hum of an old jazz station she'd turned on to fill the silence. I'd shown up with a bottle of red wine, nothing fancy, just something I grabbed from the corner store because it had a cork and not a screw cap. She'd laughed when I handed it over, but she opened it anyway, pouring 2 glasses while the pasta water boiled. The sauce was simmering on the stove, a simple marinara with basil she'd clipped from the pots on her porch. I sat at the table watching her move bare feet on the tile, hair twisted up with a pencil, an old apron tied loose around her waist. She looked like she belonged there in that moment, and I felt like an intruder who'd somehow been invited to stay. We didn't talk much while she cooked, just the clink of the spoon against the pot, the occasional direction, hand me the salt, and my clumsy attempt to grate Parmesan without shredding my knuckles. When the food was ready, she set 2 plates on the table, steam curling up between us. Spaghetti salad made from whatever greens were left in her fridge, a couple of slightly wilted tomatoes sliced thin. It wasn't a date. We'd both said that out loud more than once. But it didn't feel like rehearsal either. We ate slowly. The wine was cheap but warm going down, and the jazz station played something with a saxophone that made the room feel softer. She twirled pasta around her fork eyes on her plate. I watched her trying not to stare, but failing. There was a smudge of sauce on her cheek, and I reached out without thinking, thumb brushing it away. She froze fork halfway to her mouth, then smiled, small, surprised, real. "Thanks," she said, voice low. "No problem." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was the kind you could sit in without needing to fill it. When the plates were empty, I stood to clear them. She started to protest, but I was already at the sink sleeves, rolled up soap, foaming under the faucet. She joined me, drying what I washed, our hips bumping in the narrow space. Neither of us moved away. That's when she said it, almost too quiet to hear over the running water. "I wrote something. After the divorce. Never sent it." I glanced at her. She was staring at the dish in her hands, a plain white plate like it held the answer to something. What kind of something? An article. She set the plate in the rack, reached for a towel to dry her hands. For a magazine. They'd asked for personal essays. I titled it, "The Day I Found Myself Again." Sounds cheesy, I know. It doesn't, I said. "What's it about?" She hesitated, then crossed to the living room, motioning for me to follow. I dried my hands on my jeans and trailed after her. The coffee table was cluttered with notebooks, a laptop, a stack of printed pages. She pulled one sheet from the bottom, folded and creased, like it had been read 100 times. She handed it to me. The paper was warm from her grip. I scanned the first paragraph, her voice on the page, sharp and honest. It was about the morning she woke up alone in their Chicago apartment, the silence louder than any fight they'd ever had. About packing her things into 2 suitcases while he was at work, leaving the keys on the counter. About driving west until the skyline disappeared in the rear view. I looked up. She was watching me, arms crossed tight, like she was bracing for judgment. "It's good," I said. And it was. Raw, but good. She shrugged, but her eyes were glassy. I couldn't send it. Felt too exposed. I turned the page over. In the margin in her neat handwriting was a note. "For when I'm brave enough to write it again." I looked at her. "You should." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Easy for you to say. You fix bikes. I used to chase stories that could ruin people's lives. Now I can't even finish one about my own." I set the page down, careful, like it might break. "You're not ruined, Julia, you're just..." Paused, like a bike with a slipped chain. "Needs a nudge, not a rebuild." She stared at me, then at the page, then back at me. "You always talk like that. Only when I'm nervous." She smiled, then really smiled, the kind that reached her eyes and made the room feel brighter. "You're not nervous." Liar. We stood there, the jazz station crackling softly, the dishwasher humming in the background. I wanted to say something else, something that would keep that smile on her face, but the words stuck. Instead, I reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't flinch. Her skin was warm under my fingers. "I should go," I said, but I didn't move. She nodded, but her hand caught my wrist light, like she wasn't sure she wanted to let go. "Mason, yeah, thank you for this, for not making it weird." I smiled. "We're still weird, just the good kind." She laughed, and the sound followed me out the door, down the steps, across the street to my own porch. I didn't sleep much that night. Kept replaying the way she'd said my name, the way her hand had lingered on my wrist. The party was tomorrow. We had a plan. But somewhere between the pasta and the dishwasher, the plan had stopped mattering. The next morning, I found a note under my door. Same handwriting as the margin note, folded neat. "You were right. I'm not ruined, just paused. See you tonight." Jay, I kept that one too. The evening of the block party arrived with the sky the color of ripe peaches and the smell of charcoal drifting down the street. I'd spent the afternoon at the shop, distracted, dropping tools and mixing up orders until my boss told me to go home early. I showered, changed into the only button-down I owned that didn't smell like chain grease, and stood in front of the mirror trying to tame my hair. It didn't work. I gave up and crossed the street at 7:25, heart thudding like I was 16 again. Julia was waiting on her porch, one hand on the railing, the other smoothing the skirt of a pale green dress I'd never seen before. It wasn't fancy, just cotton sleeveless hitting mid-calf, but it made her look younger, lighter like the weight she carried had loosened for the night. Her hair was down loose waves, catching the last of the sunlight. When she saw me, she smiled small and nervous and stepped down to meet me halfway. "You clean up nice," she said. "You too." I offered my arm half joking. She took it, fingers curling around my elbow like it was the most natural thing. Her hand was cool steady. Mine wasn't. We walked the 2 blocks to the community park where the party was already in full swing. String lights crisscrossed above picnic tables, kids chased each other with glow sticks, and someone's dad was attempting Sweet Caroline on a portable speaker. The air smelled like grilled corn and citronella. Heads turned as we approached, not many, just enough to notice. I felt Julia's grip tighten. "Relax," I murmured. "We've got this." She exhaled a shaky laugh. "Right. Fake it till we make it." We grabbed plates, potato salad, coleslaw, burgers that were more charcoal than beef, and found a spot near the edge of the crowd. I kept my hand at the small of her backlight like we'd practiced. She leaned into it just enough. We ate standing up, making small talk with Mrs. Larson about her roses and Mr. Patel about his bad knee. Every time someone glanced our way, Julia's smile got a little tighter, but she held it. Then I saw him. Mark was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who wore his watch like a billboard. His arm was around a woman half his age, blonde-tan dress, tight enough to make conversation unnecessary. They were laughing too loud near the dessert table, her hand on his chest like she owned it. Julia's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Don't look," I said, but it was too late. Mark's eyes landed on us. His smile faltered, then widened like a cat spotting a mouse. He said something to the blonde, and they started toward us. "Julia," he called, voice carrying. "Didn't expect to see you here." She straightened, plate balanced in one hand, the other still on my arm. "Mark?" He stopped a few feet away, the blonde clinging to his side. Up close, she looked even younger, maybe 26 tops. Her perfume was loud, floral, and sharp. "This is Tiffany," Mark said, gesturing like he was unveiling a prize. "Tiff, this is my ex-wife, and—" His eyes flicked to me, curious, dismissive. "Friend, boyfriend," I said before Julia could answer. I slid my arm around her waist, pulling her closer. "Mason." Mark's eyebrows shot up. Tiffany giggled a sound like breaking glass. "Wow," she said. "Didn't know you were into the help, Jules." Julia's jaw tightened. I felt it through her ribs. "Careful," I said, voice low. "That's my girlfriend you're talking to." Tiffany's smile faltered. Mark recovered first, chuckling like I'd told a joke. "Easy, kid. Just catching up." He turned to Julia. "You look good. Different." "Thanks," she said. Her voice was steady, but her fingers dug into my side. Mark opened his mouth, probably to say something else smug, but the music shifted to a slow song, something old and sappy. I didn't think. I just acted. "Dance with me," I said to Julia loud enough for them to hear. She blinked surprised, but let me lead her toward the patch of grass serving as a dance floor. A few other couples were already swaying under the lights. I pulled her in, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. She fit against me like we'd done this 100 times. "You okay?" I asked, lips near her ear. "No," she whispered. "But keep going." We moved slow, barely swaying. Her head rested against my shoulder, breath warm on my neck. I could feel eyes on us mark Tiffany half the neighborhood, but they faded into the background. It was just her heartbeat against mine, the string lights blurring into gold. Then I felt her tense. Mark was watching, arms crossed, Tiffany whispering in his ear. Julia's fingers clenched in my shirt. "He doesn't win anything," I said. She pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes were bright, fierce, a little scared. "Prove it." I didn't think. I just kissed her. Not the polite peck we'd practiced. A real kiss, slow, deliberate, the kind that stops time. Her lips parted, surprised, then pressed back. Her hand slid up to my neck, fingers threading through my hair. The world narrowed to the taste of her wine and mint and something I couldn't name. When we broke apart, the music was still playing, but everything else had gone quiet. Someone whistled. A kid laughed. Mrs. Larson gasped like she'd seen a ghost. Julia's cheeks were flushed, eyes wide. "Mason?" "I'm sorry," I said, but I wasn't. Not even a little. She touched her lips, then smiled, small, stunned, real. Don't be. We stayed another 20 minutes, long enough to finish our dance to grab slices of watermelon to say polite goodbyes. Mark watched us leave, his arm tight around Tiffany, but he didn't say another word. The walk home was quiet, her hand in mine, the night air cooler now. At her porch, she stopped. That wasn't fake, she said. No, I agreed. It wasn't. She looked at me for a long moment, then up at the sky. I need time to figure out what this is. I nodded, throat tight. Take all the time you need. She went inside without another word. I stood there until her porch light went off. The next morning, I left coffee on her step like always. She didn't come out. I didn't expect her to. 3 days passed. No texts. No waves across the fence. I fixed bikes, grilled alone, left coffee every morning. On the 4th day, the cup was still there when I got home untouched. I told myself it was fine. She needed space. I'd promised her that, but it hurt more than I thought it would. The summer stretched on hot and slow, the kind of days where the sun hangs heavy and the nights refuse to cool. I kept to my routine, shop in the morning porch and the evening coffee on Julia's step every dawn. Most cups came back empty by nightfall, but she never appeared. I didn't push. I'd promised her time, and I meant it, even if it carved a hollow space under my ribs that no amount of bike grease or cold beer could fill. I saw her once from a distance. She was on her porch, laptop open, hair twisted up with that same pencil. She looked up when my truck rumbled past, our eyes meeting for a second through the windshield. She lifted a hand, not quite a wave, more an acknowledgement, then disappeared inside. I took it as a sign she was okay, or at least trying to be. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip for a week after the party. Mrs. Larson cornered me at the mailbox, eyes gleaming. Quite the show you two put on, she said. I just smiled and said, just helping a friend. She didn't buy it, but she let it go. Mark and Tiffany skipped the next few block events. Good riddance. July bled into August. The maple trees started dropping early leaves, crisp and gold. I threw myself into work, sketching plans for Haven cycles on napkins during lunch breaks. I even called a realtor about a vacant storefront downtown, small, rundown, perfect. It felt like moving forward even if my heart was stuck in neutral. Then one evening I came home to find my porch light on. I never left it on. There was a note taped to the door, same neat handwriting as before. Meet me on my porch. Bring your appetite. Jay. My pulse kicked hard. I showered in 5 minutes, threw on a clean shirt, and crossed the street with a six-pack I didn't remember grabbing. The air smelled like rain, coming the sky-bruised purple. Julia was waiting, 2 mugs on the table, a plate of sandwiches wrapped in foil. She'd changed into a loose linen shirt sleeves, rolled hair down for once. She looked tired but steady, like she'd been carrying something heavy, and finally set it down. Hey, I said, setting the beer beside the mugs. Hey, she gestured to the chair. Sit. I did. She pushed a sandwich toward me, turkey Swiss mustard, the kind my grandpa used to make. You remembered, I said. I pay attention. We ate in silence, at first the kind that didn't need filling. Crickets chirped. A car rolled by, slow headlights sweeping the fence. When the plates were empty, she reached under the table and pulled out a slim folder. She slid it across to me. I sent it, she said. I opened it. The article, the story I was afraid to tell, printed on heavy paper, a small logo in the corner, Pacific Northwest Quarterly. Accepted. Her name in bold. I read the first line aloud. I used to think love was a deadline. Turns out it's a porch light left on. I looked up. Julia. A little magazine, she said, shrugging, but her eyes were bright. But they want more. A series, maybe. I turned to the last page. In the margin, a new note in her handwriting. For the boy who left coffee and never asked for anything back. My throat closed. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She took a breath, steady. I was scared, Mason, of what people would say, of what it meant. But I'm tired of being scared. I set the folder down, careful. And now I want to stop pretending. She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. Her fingers were warm, sure. I don't know what we are. But I know I don't want to figure it out alone. I turned my hand over, lacing our fingers. Then don't. We sat there as the first raindrops tapped the porch roof, soft and steady. She didn't move closer. I didn't pull away. The space between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything we hadn't said yet. Later, when the rain picked up, she stood and held out her hand. Come inside. It's getting cold. I took it. We left the mugs, the empty foil, the folder with her future in it. The porch light stayed on behind us, glowing steady through the downpour. No one on the street needed to know what we were. But we both did. The pretending was over. The summer wasn't.